When we talk about restoration, many people imagine a dramatic interruption of their circumstances, something loud, something obvious, something that forces itself into their awareness. But the ways of God rarely follow that pattern. The first sign that restoration has begun is not external, it is internal. It is a subtle stirring in your discernment, a quiet shift in your atmosphere, a sense that something you cannot name is drawing near. And the tragedy is that most people miss divine moments not because God was silent, but because their spirits were distracted. Discernment is not an emotional reaction, it is a cultivated sensitivity. It's the ability to separate noise from signal, to recognize when a spiritual season is turning even before anything physically changes. There are people who wait until life forces them to pay attention, but those who walk in discernment respond the moment the wind begins to move. They perceive God's involvement in small alignments, in unusual burdens, in sudden peace, in unexplainable discomfort, in unexpected opportunities. Nothing is ordinary to a discerning heart. Everything becomes a potential message, and sometimes discernment feels like contradiction. You look at your life and see nothing improving, yet deep within you, an awareness begins to rise. Pay attention. Something is shifting. That inner witness is often the first announcement of restoration, long before anything around you confirms it. This is why many miss what heaven is doing. They are waiting for loud signs, while God is moving through whispers. Discernment requires stillness. A restless mind cannot perceive divine movement. A heart crowded with fear, comparison, resentment, or constant activity becomes spiritually deaf. But when a person chooses stillness, mental, emotional, and spiritual, they begin to notice what others overlook. They begin to sense the weight of moments, the significance of encounters, and the value of obedience. You cannot embrace restoration if you cannot recognize its arrival. The wind always blows before the rain falls. And the individuals who discern it early become the ones who prepare, position, and align themselves quickly enough to receive the fullness of what God is sending. So pay attention to the subtle promptings. Pay attention to the unusual awareness you cannot explain. Pay attention to the internal nudges that make you pause. These are not accidents, they are invitations. Restoration does not begin with miracles. It begins with discernment. And the one who trains their heart to perceive the wind will always be ready to receive the rain. When people hear the word restoration, they often imagine a simple reversal, the idea that God will return exactly what was taken, exactly as it was. But divine restoration operates on a much higher plane. It is not a backward movement, it is an upward one. When God restores a person, he does not merely hand back what was lost. He elevates them into a reality where the loss no longer determines their identity, decisions, or destiny. Restoration is transformation. It is the recalibration of your life to a version of you that would not have existed without the lesson, the wound, the waiting, or the seeming setback. There are seasons where life fractures something within you. Your confidence, your trust, your sense of direction. And sometimes what is lost goes deeper than what others can see. You can lose years to confusion, relationships to immaturity, opportunities to fear, and purpose to survival. But the beauty of divine restoration is that it does not depend on the intactness of your past. It depends on the intention of God. He is not restoring what you were. He is restoring who you are becoming. Psychologically, human beings often anchor their self-worth to what they possess or achieve. So when loss happens, identity begins to collapse. You start defining yourself by what slipped through your fingers. But spiritually, restoration breaks that cycle. It disconnects your future from your past failures, and it reintroduces you to the version of you that heaven originally designed. This is why divine restoration often feels disproportionate. What comes back is bigger than what was taken. What returns is deeper than what was broken. You prayed for recovery, but God answers with elevation. You asked for the door you lost, but God brings you into a house you didn't build. Restoration isn't symmetry, it's multiplication. It's God rewriting your future in a way that forces even your losses to serve your destiny. So when you pray for restoration, don't confine God to the shape of what you lost. Don't demand that He replicate what was taken. Sometimes the loss was necessary because the next version of you could not have emerged without it. Restoration is God's way of proving that nothing in your life, even the painful parts, was wasted. And if you can embrace that truth, you will stop mourning what was and start preparing for what can be. Because what God restores is always greater than what was lost. There are places in a person's life that become so barren, so empty, so consistently disappointing that they begin to feel permanent. You look at those areas, your finances, your relationships, your health, your creativity, your spiritual fire, and you quietly conclude, this part of my life is just dry. It will always be dry, but what people often forget is that dryness is never the problem, the absence of breath is. When the breath of God enters a space, what looked unchangeable begins to reorganize itself with surprising speed. Every human being carries inner deserts, silent wounds, forgotten dreams, battles they no longer admit they're fighting. But restoration does not begin in the places that look alive. It begins exactly where the death is obvious. God is not intimidated by emptiness. He seeks it out because emptiness creates the space for His fullness to be revealed. The dry bones in your life are not evidence of abandonment. They are evidence of where His wind is needed the most. Philosophically, dryness represents disconnection, the gap between who you were created to be and the version of you shaped by disappointment or delay. Psychologically, dryness affects hope. It trains the mind to expect nothing, to stop imagining, to normalize stagnation. That's why people live for years in situations that shrink their potential. Dryness feels predictable, and predictability feels safe. But restoration disrupts that safety. It brings movement to the places you learned to avoid. When the breath of God comes, it confronts the agreements you made with hopelessness. Sometimes the wind doesn't bring immediate results. It first stirs the dust. It exposes what was buried. It awakens the parts of you that became numb. And because this process feels uncomfortable, many withdraw before the miracle completes. But the wind does not blow to tease you. It blows to rebuild you. It brings structure to chaos, alignment to confusion, and life to what was dismissed as dead. So don't despise the dry places in your life. They are the exact locations where God intends to demonstrate His power. Restoration does not avoid brokenness. It targets it. It brings honor out of the places you hid, strength out of the places you feared, and life out of the places you gave up on. If you can believe that your dry bones can live again, then you are already standing in the beginning of your restoration. One of the most liberating truths a person can embrace is that loss has an expiry date, pain has a timeline, delay has a limit. What feels endless from a human standpoint is never endless from a divine perspective. There comes a moment in every destiny when heaven makes a legislative decision enough. And when that decree is released, everything that has resisted your progress begins to lose its power. Not gradually, suddenly, because restoration is not only an act of mercy, it is an act of timing. We often misinterpret the silence of God as neglect, not realizing that time itself is a tool in His hands. There are seasons when you are kept waiting, not because your breakthrough is denied, but because your foundation is still being built. And there are seasons when the waiting ends, not because you finally became deserving, but because the timing finally became aligned. Restoration follows divine timing, not human impatience. Psychologically, humans measure seasons emotionally. When something has hurt for too long, the mind begins to believe it will hurt forever. The brain creates patterns around disappointment. You start preparing for losses even before they happen. You shrink your expectations so that you don't experience another wound. But divine timing interrupts that psychological cycle. When heaven declares restoration, the internal narrative begins to shift before the external conditions follow. You start sensing possibility again. You begin imagining outcomes that once felt unrealistic. The heart starts waking up. Philosophically, every cycle carries within itself the seed of its conclusion. Nothing in creation sustains the same intensity forever. There is a scriptural rhythm to life. After night comes morning, after sowing comes reaping, after pruning comes growth. The season of loss always comes with a built-in expiration date, even if you cannot see it. And the mystery is this: when the time of restoration arrives, even the things that resisted you become instruments for your rising. Delays turn into testimonies, setbacks turn into platforms, losses turn into lessons that position you for greater influence. The timing of God ensures that when restoration comes, it carries weight, credibility, and impact. So if you find yourself standing in a place where everything feels slow or stuck or stagnant, remember this: time is working for you, not against you. Restoration is not late, it is scheduled. And when that moment arrives, everything that once held you back will have no choice but to release you into your future. Restoration is never accidental. It doesn't simply unfold because the season is right. It unfolds because your heart is positioned correctly. Prayer is the posture that aligns you with what God is doing. And the quality of your engagement determines the quality of your transformation. Many people pray, but very few pray with expectation. They speak words, but their hearts remain neutral. They ask for restoration, yet secretly prepare for disappointment. But restoration does not respond to empty repetition. It responds to conviction, hunger, and alignment. Prayer is not a ritual. It is an internal agreement with the possibilities of God. When you pray with genuine expectation, you are effectively telling heaven, I am ready for what you are sending. Expectation shifts the atmosphere within you. It sharpens your discernment, heightens your awareness, and dismantles the psychological patterns of defeat. You stop praying from a place of fear and start praying from a place of revelation. You stop pleading as though you are uncertain and start engaging as someone who understands the integrity of the one you are addressing. Psychologically, expectation alters the way you process reality. It trains your mind to look for alignment instead of obstacles. It opens your eyes to opportunities that were always present but previously invisible. When the inner posture changes, the world around you begins to respond differently. Even your language shifts. You stop rehearsing your pain and start declaring your future. You stop magnifying your losses and start acknowledging your potential. Expectation is not optimism, it is spiritual readiness. Philosophically, prayer with expectation is an act of partnership. It is acknowledging that while restoration comes from God, participation comes from you. There are doors that open only when your faith meets His timing. There are realms that activate only when your confidence aligns with His intention. When your prayer carries expectation, you move beyond asking for help. You begin to align your decisions, your habits, and your mindset with the reality you are praying for. This is why casual prayer produces casual results. It lacks the energy, the focus, the surrender, and the internal shift required for deep transformation. But when prayer becomes intentional, when every word is charged with belief, when every request carries weight, you become a vessel ready for visitation. So don't pray like someone who is testing possibilities. Pray like someone who knows restoration is already in motion. Because once your heart is aligned with expectation, heaven has nothing left to withhold. When God restores a person, He does not do it in secrecy. Restoration carries a sound, it carries a visibility, it carries a weight that cannot be hidden even if you tried. There is a dimension of divine intervention that announces itself, not to inflate your ego, but to testify of His sovereignty. When restoration truly comes, it reorganizes your influence, reshapes your relationships, redefines your reputation, and repositions your destiny in ways that become impossible to ignore. Many people imagine that restoration means quietly sliding back into the life they once had. But God is not interested in returning you to where you were. He is committed to elevating you to a higher plane of purpose and visibility. This is why genuine restoration often attracts attention. People who once overlooked you suddenly recognize you. Opportunities that once dismissed you now pursue you. Doors that were previously sealed against you begin to open with a kind of effortless ease. It is not because you changed your strategy. It is because restoration has altered your stature. Psychologically, human beings respond to what appears renewed, strengthened, or transformed. When restoration happens, even those who doubted you begin to reassess your value. This is not vanity. It is a principle of influence. People are drawn to evidence. And restoration provides evidence that resilience is rewarded, that brokenness can be rebuilt, that time can be redeemed, that divine involvement can change a narrative faster than human effort ever could. Philosophically, restoration challenges the notion that progress is purely self-generated. It becomes a public demonstration that there are forces beyond human limitation, working in alignment with destiny. When God restores you, He turns your life into a living metaphor, a signpost that reminds others that delay is not denial, and that grace can usher someone into a future far greater than their past. This is why restored people do not remain in the shadows. They carry a newness that demands expression. They move differently, they speak differently, they expect differently. Their lives carry an aroma of possibility that stirs faith in everyone who encounters them. So, when your restoration comes, do not apologize for it. Do not shrink to make others comfortable. Do not downplay what God has rebuilt in you. Restoration is meant to be seen, heard, and felt not for your glory, but for His. And when the world witnesses what God has done in you, let your life quietly whisper one truth: restoration is real, and I am its evidence.